Hi, my name is Sarah Glenn. I am one of the community education specialists at the Women's Center of Tarrant County, and I am here to talk to y'all today about stalking and how media and technology have influenced stalking over the past few years. January is Stalking Awareness Month, which is why we are having this training today, and I hope that I can just help you all recognize some signs of stalking, define what it is, and hopefully if you or somebody you know is experiencing this, to help you find some resources. I do just want to let you all know the Women's Center is funded in part by the Office of Violence Against Women as well as the United States Department of Justice, so any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations that are expressed in this training are those of the Women's Center, and they don't necessarily reflect the views of the state or the Department of Justice. I do want to let you know a little bit about our services at the Women's Center before we get started in our training. The Women's Center was founded in 1979, and our mission is to empower men, women, and families to overcome violence, crisis, and poverty. And we do that with three main departments. We have an employment solutions department, which helps people find a job or find a better paying job. We have a general counseling department that assists people with general mental health needs like anxiety, depression, couples counseling, grief counseling, those types of things. Our general counseling department also has a program that works with the homeless population in Tarrant County, as well as a program that works with the aging and elderly population in Tarrant County. The department that I work for is the Rape Crisis and Victim Services Department. We are the Rape Crisis Center for Tarrant County, so what that means is when somebody is sexually assaulted and they go to the hospital for a forensic exam, the victims have a legal right to have an advocate present, and we are the agency in Tarrant County that provides those advocates. But we also provide a continuum of services for survivors of sexual assault and abuse, as well as any other type of violent crime, including domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking. So we have free counseling services, not only for those primary survivors, but also secondary survivors. So meaning, not only the person who experiences the crime, but we know that the trauma from that crime spreads, and so we want to make sure the support people who are also being impacted by that crime are going to get free counseling services as well. We have a 24-hour crisis hotline that people can access 24/7 with symptoms regarding their victimization. We'll help de-escalate that crisis and try to find them some resources. We also have legal services for survivors at no cost to them. Mostly what our attorney and paralegal assist with our family law situations regarding their victimization, but we can also accompany survivors to criminal trials, as well as provide some very limited civil law help. And the last thing we do is kind of like a subcategory within the Rape Crisis and Victim Services Department is our violence prevention and education. That's what I do. We have a program for pre-K through 12th grade students called Play It Safe. We help kids recognize, respond to, and report things like physical and sexual abuse. And then we also talk to adults and professionals in the community, just trying to raise people's awareness about different types of violent crime. So sexual assault and abuse, domestic violence, dating violence, stalking, any of those types of things. Let them know what resources are available for people who experience those crimes, as well as when we work with professionals, we're trying to help them interact with survivors in a trauma-informed way. If you have any questions about our services, please feel free to visit our website at www.womenscentertc.org. So what I want to talk to you all about today is really just to understand what stalking is in general terms and in legal terms, discuss how stalking tactics have changed over time and what the role of technology is. And we'll look at some of the intersections between stalking and intimate partner violence, because so often stalking happens within the context of intimate partner violence. And also look at identifying some security tips for victims of stalking, as well as what are you going to do, if you or somebody that you know is going through something like this. So looking at the definition of stalking, if we're just looking at a general definition, it would be a course of conduct directed at a specific person that would cause a reasonable person to feel fear. And here's the thing about this. Context is going to be so important here, because what is going to cause one person to feel fear may not cause somebody else to feel fear. So if there is context behind the stalker's behaviors that would cause the victim to feel that fear, even if it wouldn't cause, a general person to feel fear, that context is going to be so important. Now, under Texas Penal Code, really stalkers are not allowed to do these things, and if they do these things, this is what constitutes stalking. So on more than one occasion, so there has to be a pattern of behavior. They're placing the victim under surveillance, making threats, restraining them, confining them, or displaying behaviors or threats that cause the victim to fear immediate or future injury, death, or damage to their property. And what I would like to say here is when it says on more than one occasion, that does not mean that each behavior has to happen on more than one occasion. It means that there has to be more than one behavior. So there could be one time that the victim was placed under surveillance and one time that the victim was threatened with injury. Okay, and that could start to constitute a stalking charge. And the second thing here, threats and or actions can be conveyed either directly to the victim or to family members or household members. Some statistics of stalking. We know approximately 15% of women and 5% of men in Texas have been stalked in their lifetime. So that's a pretty good number of people, especially considering, this is probably underreported. Okay, an estimated 7.5 million people per year are stalked in the United States, and less than 50% of stalking victims report that stalking to law enforcement. So unfortunately, we know that stalking behaviors are often behaviors that are perpetrated by intimate partners, and often by more dangerous intimate partners. Okay, so if you're in an intimate partner violence relationship and they're exhibiting some of these stalking behaviors, we know that that can be a little bit more dangerous as well as long-term. 11% of stalking victims have been stalked for 5 years or more. So we have actually heard stories from some of our clients of cases that have lasted over 10 years, over 15 years, right, of these stalking behaviors happening for long periods of time. Now, when we look at who the perpetrators are, so the purple bars you see are female victims, the blue bars you see are male victims. So for female victims, 60% of their stalkers are current or former intimate partners. For males, that's 43%. About 24% of female victims have an acquaintance stalker, 31% for males. 16% of female victims have a stranger as their stalker, about 20% for males. And for female victims, about 6% experience stalking by a family member versus almost 10% for males. So again, the vast majority of this is happening by current or former intimate partners, followed by acquaintances. And by gender, for female victims, about 88% of the time, their perpetrators are males. 7% of the time, their perpetrators are females. And about 5% of the time, they may have more than one stalker, one being a male, one being a female, or more than two even. For males, about 48% of the time they have a male perpetrator, 45% of the time they have a female perpetrator, and about 7% of the time they may have more than one stalker of different genders. So let's look at some stalking tactics and how they have changed over time. So in a study that was done by the CDC, they looked at what tactics were stalkers using, and this report was released in 2010. So we started to see some technology in these tactics, but then a report that was released just 4 years later will look at the difference between this report and a report that was released just 4 years later. So in 2010, the most common way that stalkers harassed their victims was through unwanted phone calls. Right, so for female victims, about 78% had unwanted phone calls, whether that was at their home or at their place of employment or school, and then about 75% for male victims, followed by 57% for female victims just being approached or having the stalker show up somewhere that they weren't expecting them to show up. And that was about 43% for male victims. Okay. And then after that, being watched or followed. Okay. So you see kind of unwanted emails or messages being kind of low on that list, but other forms of stalking being placed under surveillance or watched or followed, being approached or sneaking into the victim's home or car, right, were higher even than just receiving unwanted messages or emails. But in a report that was released just 4 years later, we see they've added some different categories, right, because of the role of technology, but also unwanted phone calls, right, went down for both male and female victims. Unwanted messages, right, emails are in a different category here, but unwanted messages, this included text or voice messages. They had to add this category because of how prevalent it was. Unwanted emails, instant messages, or messages through social media, right? They expanded that list and that did go up. I would venture to guess, if this study were done again, that these tactics for unwanted messages, right, messages through social media or instant messages would have skyrocketed. Unwanted gifts or cards or letters, we see that happening a lot with female victims, not so much with male victims. And then also you see an increase in being watched or followed or placed under surveillance. And some of that being placed under surveillance can include different types of technology. Okay, being approached or showed up seem to have increased for female victims, right, but kind of stayed the same or even decreased for male victims. And then having strange or threatening items being left, right, we see that has gone up a little bit. So thinking about some of these things, a lot of it seems kind of harmless at the beginning, right? If somebody's calling you a lot, or sending you repeated text messages, unwanted messages on social media, some of that can seem kind of innocuous, but as it escalates, right, a lot of times people wait until the behaviors escalate into something a little bit more dangerous before they start documenting or before they start reporting these behaviors to any sort of authority. And I would definitely make the recommendation that if you feel like you or somebody is being stalked, okay, to document it from the very beginning. Okay, any of these types of behaviors that you're seeing, make sure to start documenting that and reporting it. Unfortunately, we know for stalking, we rely so heavily on the victims for information, right, and for evidence. And a lot of times the victims have to play their own advocates in these types of situations. So be your own best advocate or your friend's own best advocate, right, and encourage that they're documenting and that they're keeping everything, right? Don't throw anything away, don't delete anything, keep it all, start documenting it early. And we know about 2/3 of stalkers pursue their victims at least once a week. Many of them are pursuing them daily, and they're using more than one tactic, right? A lot of them are using all of these tactics. So looking at the role of technology, there are a few different types of technology that I want to talk about today. So social media, spoof calling, spyware, and data brokering, and we'll go into each one of those. So we know social media, there's a few safety concerns that I want to talk about here. When you are being tagged in photos, that can let people know where you are, right? Or geotagging, checking in to a restaurant, checking into somewhere that you're going for a fun day out. All of those things can indicate to a stalker where you physically are. And a lot of times that may not even be something that you have control over, because maybe your friends are tagging you. Maybe you have on your location settings that it's actually pinging your location, right? There's lots of different things that we want to make sure that we're aware of. Photos that you post, right? Not only if you don't turn off your location settings, if somebody wants to, they can find out where that picture was taken. But there's also things that we have to consider, that people can look at a picture and find something identifying about it. And to give an example of that, this is a picture of my son, and I posted it around his 2nd birthday, and just showing a picture of him at his daycare eating a donut for his birthday into a local mom group that I was a part of. And one of the moms sent a comment back telling me what daycare he went to. And I was just kind of taken aback by that, because I was like, well, this person doesn't know me, right? They don't know where I live. They don't know, I haven't posted where I live or anything like that. But this daycare was a daycare chain, and it turns out that she was an employee at that daycare and had looked and seen some identifying information, this little character that they use at my son's daycare. And some other identifying information that they could have gleaned from this picture was he was wearing a birthday shirt, right? And how old he was. And depending on the date that I posted it, could have gotten more identifying information, right? So being aware of what we're posting on the internet and what types of identifying information are attached to the things that we're posting. The second thing I want to talk about is spoof calling. Spoof calling is a way for people to disguise their phone number. They can disguise their voice and make it look like a number that you would recognize, okay? So they can disguise it as a business phone number. They can disguise it as a family member's phone number, if they happen to have that. And what they're trying to do is mislead you into picking up the phone or answering a text, okay? Now, a lot of telemarketers do this too. If you've ever gotten a phone call, from what looks like very similar to your phone number, telemarketers do this a lot, but it is available for anyone to use. Now, again, what I would suggest, if you have a stalking situation or know somebody who is in a stalking situation, make sure that you have a way to actually identify who is calling you. Maybe set up some sort of identifiers, right? When you answer the phone, like, hey, what was that conversation we had last week about? Maybe ask them to give a little recap to identify themselves to you. Okay. Spyware. So this is malicious software that infects your PC or your phone and gathers personal information about you. And it sends that information to a third party, often the person who installed the spyware on your device. So most commonly we see this being implemented onto phones, okay? Because a lot of times it's, if it is in the context of an intimate partner relationship, it's not uncommon to have access to each other's devices, right? And so we're looking at each other's devices and seeing what's on there, but then that person can very easily download spyware onto that phone. And then they have access to see all of the victim's text messages, read them, listen in on phone calls, see their GPS location in real time, right from a third location, okay, at any point. So this is a real security concern for victims of stalking. And if you think that this might have happened to you, we recommend doing a factory reset on your phone. And when you do that, make sure that you have backed up all of your important information, photos, documents, things like that. Back all of that stuff up, but do not just upload and re-download all of your apps like into the cloud. Don't upload the apps into the cloud and then re-download them, because that will re-download the spyware onto your device. you want to go back in and download your apps one at a time. Okay, so I'm going to show y'all a video that shows how stalkers can use both spoof calling and spyware in conjunction, to gain information about their victims.
Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to install Flexispy without having the target device. It is actually really easy to do and just takes a minute or two, and as a bonus I'm going to show you how to get a free copy of Flexispy at the end of this video. So if you're anything like me, you're probably dying to know how to install Flexispy without having the target device on you. You've probably been searching the internet endlessly for instructions on how to do this as well, and you probably haven't found any answers or just some bogus stuff. I'm just going to do you a favor and tell you to stop searching, being that it is impossible to install any cell phone spyware or cell phone tracking software if you do not have the target device that you want to install it on. But I have learned a way around this by using something called Spoof Calling, which I will explain in just a second. Assuming that you do not have the target device, whether it be a tablet, desktop computer, or cell phone, Spoof Calling will allow you to call the owner of the target device from any number you desire. So when you make a spoof call, this means that you can make a call to any phone, disguise your phone number with anyone else's number on the receiving end's caller ID. And this is what you are going to do in order to install Flexispy on the target device when you do not physically have it. What I do is I go to a spoof calling website that offers a free trial. Yes, they cost money if you want to do a lot of spoof calling, and people use it for many different reasons. But I use the one with the free trial where I go to the site, I enter my phone number, then I enter the phone number I want to be disguised as. Being that you are trying to install Flexispy on someone else's phone without physically having it, you'll want to disguise your phone number as a business or a professional establishment such as a phone company. The reason you want to make a spoof call disguised as a business or a professional establishment is because you or someone else are going to need to actually talk to the target device's owner. For example, when I needed to install Flexispy a while back, I thought my girlfriend, I thought she was cheating on me. She always hid her phone from me, and I, just became really suspicious. I knew that she had Verizon Wireless's cell phone service, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to get a hold of her phone. So, playing it smart, I made a spoof call to her with and this is what you want to listen to because this is how easy it is to install Flexispy on another device without having it. So I made a spoof call to her with my phone number disguised as Verizon Wireless's phone number, and that's a 1-800 number. When my girlfriend picked up the phone after I called, I acted as a Verizon Wireless phone technician. I told her that we here at Verizon have noticed unusual and suspicious activity going on with your phone. She thinks I'm a phone tech from Verizon. I told her that, so now she's getting all, emotional and whatnot. But anyways, here's the trick to installing Flexispy. When you first purchase and download it from your desktop computer, Flexispy, the company, will email you a set of instructions for how to install it on the target device, which only consists of typing a link into the target device's web browser. So if it's phone, you type the link that Flexispy sends you into the web browser of that phone, but in this case, you're going to be having the actual owner of the target device do it. Being that I did not have the target device, which was, my girlfriend's iPhone, I was able to act as a professional from Verizon, and I convinced my girlfriend that she had a virus on her phone. She got all emotional, like anyone else would, and she was willing to do whatever I told her in order to save her phone and prevent all of her personal information from being stolen by someone else. I told her that the only way to get rid of it was to follow the instructions I gave her over the phone. First, I told her to open her web browser on her phone. Then I gave her the Flexispy installation link and told her to enter it into her web browser. Once she entered the installation link, the deal was done and Flexispy had been installed on her phone. It was really that easy. The best part is that she had no clue that she had just installed Flexispy, a cell phone tracking and monitoring software on her own phone, because it is so hidden. It has been about a year since I did this. She has the same phone and she remains clueless that I can track her every conversation, monitor all of her text messages, pinpoint her GPS location in real time, listen in on phone calls, all that stuff. No matter where she is and no matter where I am, I can monitor everything on her phone.
Okay, so I just want to talk about that video quickly. It is a little disturbing, and I get asked a lot if what this gentleman did was legal. So, strictly speaking, what he did was not legal. Now, using spoof calling is legal in some senses, and in some senses it's not. So for instance, on September 1st, 2019, a law went into effect stating that spoof calling was illegal for the purpose of defrauding someone, right? Basically calling under false pretenses. Now, that obviously was the motivation of this gentleman's phone call to his girlfriend, and so that would make it illegal here in Texas. Now, downloading spyware on a device in some instances is legal, in some instances is not. So, for instance, you can install spyware on your own devices. So if you own a device and you install spyware onto those devices, you know, lots of parents use them to keep track of kids and keep track of messages that their kids send and things like that. But in this situation, if he did not own that device and used a spoof call for the purpose of installing spyware onto his girlfriend's phone, that is illegal. Another type of technology I want to talk about is data brokering. So data brokers, they collect information about you from a wide range of sources and create detailed profiles about you, and then they sell or share that personal information with others. Now, a lot of these data brokers really are gathering information when you shop online or when you use social media, and they're gathering information about you and selling that information to companies, which would create targeted advertising and things like that. Things like you see on your Facebook ads that are really tailored towards what you were talking about the day before. That's what data brokers do. However, stalkers can access these data brokering sites, right, for a fee and find information about people. So really being careful what we put out on the internet can keep us safe from some of this. There's a couple that you might want to go and look up. Spokio is one, or Zaba search. Type in your name, right, and see what information they have about you. What information is out there about you that you may not want out there, okay? So here's those two websites that I talked about, zabasearch.com and spokio.com. These are the ones that you can use to find free information about people. If you want extensive information, of course you have to pay. But if you just want to kind of do a general search for yourself and see like, hey, what's out there about me? You can use one of these two sites. So I want to talk now about stalking and intimate partner violence. We know, like we saw earlier, a majority of stalkers are intimate partners, current or former. And intimate partner and acquaintance stalkers, they're more likely to physically approach the victim. They're more likely to use weapons and have behaviors escalate at a quicker rate, especially once the victim ends the relationship. And they're also more likely to reoffend. Okay, so even if they have been convicted of stalking, they're more likely to reoffend after they have, served their sentence. The most dangerous offenders, they pursue their victim. So let's say a victim moves because they are feeling unsafe, and the most dangerous offenders are those that will pursue them even after they have taken those steps to move or to have protection orders filed against that offender. Those dangerous offenders, they violate those protection orders. They might possess or have fascination with weapons. They have a tendency toward emotional outbursts and rage, and they often threaten murder or murder-suicide. And we know weapons are used to threaten victims in approximately 20% of stalking cases. And some factors that might increase risk or escalate some of these stalking behaviors are if there has been a recent separation from the offender, that intimate partner's loss of job. So if the victim is still in the relationship with the offender, if that offender loses their job, that can be a factor that will increase their risk, or increase contact from the offender or escalation of offender behaviors, right? So if they start to become more abusive within that relationship, more physically abusive, more emotionally abusive, or just start having more of those controlling and stalking behaviors. Another factor can be if the offender is served with a protection order, okay, or criminal arrest. So unfortunately, a lot of these things we think are serving justice, but at the same time, if we know that this is an offender that already has an increased risk of those violent outbursts, that can increase risk for the victim. Previous threats of violence, and then drug or alcohol abuse. So we know, unfortunately, this type of crime has an intense effect on victims. It often causes hypervigilance, anxiety, insomnia, social dysfunction, okay, flashbacks, feeling vulnerable, and it affects not only their mental health, right, but also time at work, right? They might be being harassed at work, harassing phone calls, or the offender is showing up at work. And unfortunately, more than half of stalking victims lose 5 days of work or more per month because of stalking. And I don't know about you, but I don't think that my job would be okay with me missing 5 or more days of work without a good reason, right? And so if we think about that, it could cause a victim to lose their job. Maybe they're coming in late or leaving early, trying to switch up their routine, so that they're not as easily tracked. And so that can cause some repercussions at work as well. It can cause fear, right? The victim may feel like the stalking will never stop, right? We've seen some victims who have been stalked for 10, 15 years. They might have an uncertainty of the future, even if the stalking behavior has stopped, okay? And many of them feel unsafe even in their homes. So we know 1 in 7 stalking victims move due to their victimization. So now, talking about security and safety planning, if you or somebody you know has been in a stalking situation or are currently in a stalking situation, using this assessment and risk profile can really help to kind of assess what your risk is and talk about some security strategies for you. So it's called the Stalking and Harassment Assessment and Risk Profile. I'll have a link to it towards the end of this presentation. So first, users respond to a 45 stalking situation questions in this assessment, and then based on those answers, there's 2 individually tailored narrative reports that are developed. The first report provides a narrative of the stalking situation and the risk profile, and the second provides information about the risks and safety suggestions. Now, it is really helpful. A lot of professional organizations will use this to help clients develop safety plans. So some general security tips. The first thing that I would say is, if possible, don't have any contact with the offender, right? Tell them you do not want any more contact, and make it very clear. I do understand, though, that sometimes maintaining contact is a way to stay safe, right? So you know your situation the best, But the best thing I could say to do is let them know very clearly in writing that you want no further contact, and document every single time they do contact you. Okay. Some security tips to have at home: positively identify all callers and visitors. We said earlier, having maybe a code word or some way for your callers to positively identify themselves will make sure that you are not falling victim to like a spoof call. If your fuse box is on the outside of your home, keep it locked. Okay. Be friendly with your neighbors. Let them know what's going on. We had a victim who came to the Women's Center who the only time she felt safe after a very long stint of stalking was she had a neighbor move in who was a former law enforcement officer and kind of high up in that agency, and was a detective, and when she was talking to him about her situation, he was able to, he was retired at that point and was able to keep an eye on her house, and started sending her pictures of suspicious cars, started sending her, updates about what was happening at her home when she was away. And so they were able to start tracking how often the offender actually was stopping by, how often he was doing things that were unsafe, and were ultimately able to get more charges drawn on that offender. But that's something to think about, right? Being friendly with your neighbors, letting them know what's going on, even if it is a little embarrassing, right? It could be a way to help you stay safe. At work, alerting security guards to the situation, having a coworker or a central staff person screen your calls, right? Making sure that you're not unexpectedly getting a call from the offender at work, and giving any copies of a restraining order or protective order to work. At school, alert your school resource officer or Title IX office, and report dating violence, specifically for high school kids, right? Reporting dating violence instead of stalking, because then the school has to respond in a specific way under Texas law. Now, under Title IX, all of those things can be treated equally. Okay, so you can definitely report stalking to the Title IX office. And then just some miscellaneous things to think about: using a P.O. box for your mail rather than putting your home address on information where you will have mail sent. Placing rental agreements in another person's name. That might not be convenient, but it is a way to stay safe. And then placing property in a trust and list utilities in the name of that trust. And then for the tech-based stalking that we talked about earlier, if we want to combat some of that, this app was developed by a national coalition against stalking and intimate partner violence. And so it goes through some really cool ways to stay safe online, how to combat some of that tech-based stalking. And I would encourage you to explore that website, www.techsafetyapp.org. And if that's something that you think you need to download that app, you are able to do that as well. And then documenting early and documenting every incident. So start when that stalking first begins. It can be something as simple as this little stalking incident log, just having the date, time that it happened, description of the incident, location of the incident, okay, any witnesses' names, if the police were called, and what was the report number, and what was the officer's name and badge number. And then, again, keep everything. Keep photos of destroyed property or vandalism. Keep voicemails. Keep text messages, right? All of that is evidence. And if you decide to take this to law enforcement, you're going to want to have that evidence, right? Law enforcement is going to rely heavily on stalking victims for that evidence. And then you may qualify for a protective order, Okay, a protective order can prohibit the offender from committing further acts of family violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, or stalking. They may prohibit the offender from harassing or threatening the victim either directly or indirectly by communicating the threat through another person. And it may limit how close the person can get to you, going near a school or daycare center of a child protected under that order. And here's the thing, a lot of times people will say, well, just go get a restraining order. There is a difference between a restraining order and a protective order. Restraining orders are civil and can only be enforced in civil court. Protective orders can be enforced by the police. If you don't qualify for a protective order, however, if that person does show up unexpectedly and you don't want them there, call the police and ask for a criminal trespass warning. Okay, that way the next time that they show up, they can be charged with criminal trespassing. And if there is imminent danger, beforehand, locate a safe place. Where is somewhere that you can go quickly? Okay, and that they will know that you're coming and they'll know, how to help you. Know where the stalker is and make sure that you're contacting law enforcement in those situations. Here are some resources in Tarrant County as well as the state and some national resources. So you can see towards the bottom that SHARP profile, that risk assessment that I was talking about is listed there, as well as the tech safety app, and then some resources that are in Tarrant County, as well as the state and some national resources there. All right, thank you so much for watching this training. If you would, please take a moment to fill out an evaluation. There should be a link that you can access our evaluation. I would really appreciate that. It helps us continue to do these trainings and continue to do them, throughout the county, and letting people know what these crimes are, what resources are available, and how they can seek help. If you would like to schedule a training or would like a copy of this PowerPoint or have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My phone number and email address is listed here on the slide. So thank y'all so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.